Hello guys, welcome to zip code, and today we are looking at another cup of code. We'll be talking JWT, auth, and security in Spring Boot. So this is an update video from our previous JWT authentication Spring Boot video. So if you haven't checked out that one, please do go back and check it. So this is just an update on the version 3.1 or 3.0.0 going forward. This is an update on the security part of Spring Boot. So I just want to show you here. I do have a register, login, and is authenticated endpoint. I'll be showcasing all of that. So we'll be using this example of the Spring Bank, which I will showcase some of that towards the end. So I do have some validations on a number of these fields already provided here. So I can change this. Let's say I'm going to say Jane1234, and we can leave the password as is. I don't have an issue with that, and we can just say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Let's just say 8998. Yeah, just to randomize the string. Then let's say this is Jane, and this is Doe, and then we'll say Jane at bank blah blah blah. So let's just send that and see again. Should mobile number, it should give me that. Mobile already exists, so let me just sort this out. So now it should be fine as I've updated all of the required fields. User successfully created. So now everything is happy. I can just take Jane1234 and go to my login here and pass in that and send that user, and now we get a token back, and I take this token and I use it on my collection right here. I want to pass it over there. Let's just put that token there, save it. I can actually save this as well, and the login is looking good. So now when I come to is authenticated, I can just click enter or send, and then it gives me that success, which is true. So all of this is going to be showcased in just a few minutes, and I showcase the other endpoints towards the end of the video, where we can transact, open an account, deposit, withdraw, and transfer, check the balance, and we'll see this towards the end. So let's jump right into the configs and the code and see how this can be achieved. So stay tuned. Now we are going to start from the Spring initializer right here. So let's have a look at what we have at this point. Our project is basically Java. We have Maven, and the Spring Boot version is 3.1.1, and as usual, zip code artifacts, Spring Bank, and the zip code Spring Boot banking application. And we have excuse me, and we have the packages jar, and the Java version is 17. So that's what we have, and I always recommend the latest and the greatest all at all times. So I would want you guys to also be on the latest versions of every dependencies that you have on your project. And on the dependencies, we have Spring DevTools for live reload and configurations for our environment, so that we can be able to easily test and debug our application much faster, as I would put it. And then we have Lombok, just to reduce us writing code on our POJOs, access modifiers, classes. We sort of minimize the access modifiers that are already built in. We can have getters and setters, we can have constructors, and things like that on our classes. So that's why we need Lombok. Then we have Spring Web. Obviously, we're going to have REST controllers, so we want to have Spring Web available for us, and also we want to use the embedded Tomcat application server on our application. So that's fine, and we'll be delivering that. And then we are going to use Spring Data JPA. Obviously, we want to integrate with the database, and we have the Postgres DB that we're integrating with. So we want JPA to take care of the database scripts execution there. And then we have Spring Security. Obviously, we want to protect all our REST APIs and protect our backend application. Make sure that everyone who's there is authenticated and is authorized to do whatever they are trying to do in our application. So then we added Spring Actuator. We don't really need it, but it's just there in case you want your application to, you want to check the status health of your APIs, the metrics and the sessions and things like that. You can have Actuator enabled on your application, so that's still fine. And then we have Spring Session, which basically deals with user session information or details, logged in users, logged out, and all of those details. You can have a Spring Session to take care of that. And then obviously the last one will be our database, which is Postgres database that we are integrating with. And basically it's our initializer, which is down on the description below. So please do check that out. And as you do, please do like and subscribe. And now let's get right into the code. So we are going to start on our application properties. So I see the red here. Don't worry about this. This is some of the validations that I have. So I do have a lot of try catch. So you'll see where I cover all of these, and that is not a big issue. So you see username already exists. So that's a validation that I'm catching an exception here. So that red is actually good, and I can debug if there's an issue and see what happens on the logs. So that's fine, and I'm happy with that. So continuing with the code is uh, basically the properties that we have. Postgres connection as usual, and if you want to see the configuration and how to connect to a Postgres database, I'll attach the link down in the description below as well, and you can see how to have these configurations on your application as well. And then you have a security here. This is just a random Jwt. You can generate one online, and you can check that out and have a random Jwt as your security. That is still fine. So first things first, as I've showcased, the Postman APIs that we're using in the application, we're going to start with the controllers, the authentication controllers, and see how those get the job done. So let's start from there. And actually, before starting from the controllers, let's start from the configs going backwards into the REST APIs. That way it will be much more simpler when you get to see what happens this side. So the first configuration that we're going to start at is the security configuration, which is what we have here. And in the security configuration, there's not a lot. It is a configuration class, so we use that annotation, and then we enable web security. So this is now much more efficient, much more better, improved config for a class. And I think Spring Boot really did a great job in actually delivering such a much more minified version of the security config. So once we have that, we're going to add some few dependency injections. We want the user detail service, which is already a Spring Boot service, and we're going to have a custom Jwt request filter, and we're going to see that in a few. The request filter is here, so we're going to go and have a chat on that, on what it does. And we also inject the password encoder bean, and this password encoder bean I have added over here on my application main. So I create this bean over there, and it's provided at runtime. So I do use bcrypt for the password encoder, and that bin will be available for me as well. And then after that, we are now looking into the bins that we will be creating on our security config. And the first one is Authentication Manager. So this bin, basically it will be dealing with all the user details, the login, the logout, the password encryption, and all of those. So this application manager we are getting from Spring Boot ready-made, and we have a authentication configuration, and that authentication configuration, we just give it a list of configurers that we want to set. So those configurers, we will add our configurer based on the auth that we are doing at the time. So we have an authentication manager builder, which is the auth that we have here, and we say auth dot user detail service, then we pass the user detail service, and then we give it the password encoder right there, so that when the user tries to access the application, when we get that user details, we're able to tell it the username and the password is encrypted using the bcrypt that we give in the encoder bin. So that is the configurer that we add on our list here. And then once we have set all of that, we want to then say authentication configuration dot get authentication manager, so that will give us that, and we are good to go with that bean. So it's not a lot that it does, so it's very short and simple. And then we come back to the shared security configuration, which is an HTTP security config, and we just add a few configs here. We want the cross-site resource forgery disabled, cross-site resource sharing disabled. Then we have a session management, and then in the session management we are actually stating the creation policy of all our sessions, and we're saying all the sessions will be stateless, and that's how we want the security, the REST APIs to be actually configured. Essentially, all sessions from our users will be stateless, and that's how we'll be dealing with them. So now that is set, we are then going to set the next bean, which is the security filter chain, and we are going to create the global one first. And I have two endpoints. I have user and I have bank. So we'll be dealing with users, so there's no worries about that. So we are saying HTTP security.secure matcher, security user and bank, and you can obviously add more, or you can add any matcher that you want based on the controllers that you have. You can just set that right there, and you just want to say .authorize, and you want all the requests or any request within these matchers or these controllers to be authenticated, and to make sure that all of them are protected. And you can always access them via specific roles. You can define the roles as you want as well there, but for now we are just saying any every user that we have is defaulted to the roles that we want, so there's no need to specify specific roles. But once you have admin and those, we can add roles right there to be much more explicit. And once we have all of these, the security config set, we just want to build it and return it as a security filter chain, and it will give us that security filter chain on that global bean. And now we are using multiple security filter chains, and they are for different reasons and different purposes. So I just wanted to add more so that you can be able to see them. We have global, and we have the register API security filter chain, and then we have the now I went too far, and we have the login being filter chain right there. So we have global, we have login, then we have register, like that. So if you check login and register, you will see that the security over here is basically the authentication. We say user authenticate. This one will permit all, which means it's open to everyone. Any user can basically access these endpoints, so we permit all. And then with register as well, we permit all over there, and those are the two that are allowed to be open to the public. And basically they have the same thing, with just the end the security matcher here is authenticate for the login, and it's register for registration. So those are the two that are open, and besides that, everything else is protected, and you cannot access it without DJ security filter. So once the authentication is done for any of the other APIs, because we know authenticate and register are open, once the authentication is done, what it will do is add a filter before JWT request filter, and then it will use the username password authentication filter, and it will go to authenticate our users right there. So you will see this filter in a few. Let's just go to Jwt security filter now. Let me see what else am I missing here. Yeah, so basically it's the same thing. So we have a course configuration, which is a cross origin resource sharing configuration bin, and there we just want to set, we allowed all origins, allow all methods, allow all headers. We can actually specify the ones that we want, but this is just for demo purposes, so we allow everything there. But obviously on your project or on your organization, you would want to be much more specific as to which ones you want to allow over there. And then the URL based source, and we just want to say source, register, course registration, everything, and we pass in the configurations. And this can be specific to your project or your use case, so I'm not worried about that at this level, as we are just doing this for demo purposes. So that is fine with me. And we are done with the configuration, and everything is set, everything is looking good. Now we can jump to Jwt request filter. So Jwt request filter is just a component, and it extends once per request filter. So for every request, we want to pass this Jwt request filter, and we're passing the we injecting the user detail service, and we're also injecting the Jwt token util. Excuse me, sorry about that. So the Jwt token is the one that decrypts the Jwt token and handles if it's valid, expired, and all of that. And we'll see it in a few. And let's just go there. So we're gonna do a filter chain right here. So we're gonna take the request and the response, and we're gonna take the filter chain, because the filter chain is already defined in our security configuration, so it's already available over there. We just take it and use it at this level here. And let's see what we have. So we have the request.get header, and on the header, obviously we're going to get the authorization, and that will be the Jwt token that we are going to be using. Obviously it's going to be a bearer token, and the text that we have, or the token itself, and then it's going to do the filtering based on that. And once we have the Jwt token, we are able to split the token by space from bearer and the actual token. Then we get the username from the token. Once we have the username, we get the user details. We get the user details based off of that. So we call the load user by username. And if you don't have a username over there, it will just be null. Oh, sorry about that. It is winter, so flu is roaming. Please bear with me. So if we do not have the user, obviously that will be null over there, and we already are taking care of that particular issue within the load user by username, and you will see this in our user business logic, where we take care of the invalid username over there. So once you get the username, once you get the user details rather, we then go forward to validate the token and make sure that everything in our authentication based off of the token is as we expect, and we pass in the user authentication token. Then we have the user object and the user.get authorities. Then we pass that into the authentication. We give it the authentication as we expect, and that looks good over there. So the security context is how we can access the currently logged in user. So that basically will give us the currently logged in user, and we can use the security context instead of set authentication, we get the authentication, then we will see the logged in user, and going forward we'll be able to interact with all the requests that that particular user would have. So then we actually do a do chain, a do filter over there, and it will basically allow the user or block the user, so which you'll get a success or a failure based on that. So now we are going to jump onto the Jwt token and see what that does for us. So let's go to the token util. I think with the request filter, that is fine, and we jump onto that. As we jump onto that, we have so basically this code is nothing fancy. If you want this project, you can just request it. I'll make it available via a Git repository upon request, but I do not put my project initially on the repository, but if someone requests, I do share them upon request and make them available for you guys to use. So if you're looking for this code or you're looking for this project, you can just request it and I'll forward you the repo. That's fine. And now on the util, we taking the security from our application properties as you saw earlier. So that will just be the secret, and we have a bunch of functions here. Get username from the token, and we also have get expiration date from token, get claims from token, get all claims from token, and we have is token expired, generate token, which will give us the token that we expect, and generate refresh token, which is also what we have there. And then we say do generate token, and we pass in the claims and the subject, and it will give us the JWT as we expect, and that is also fine with me. Then we say validate token, and obviously we pass in the subject, which is the username. We give it a token, it will give us the username, and we get the username by user details. And if that is good or the token is valid, then everything will be looking good. Otherwise, it just returns false, which means the token is invalid right there. So this code will be made available, no issues over there, and you can just go through it. So because it's a big class and there's nothing interesting really besides maybe let's have a chat about the do generate token. So we have a header, JWT headers, and we set the JWT header over there. Then we say the JWT builder, then we set the header as we want, and obviously that's the JWT header that we have. Then we set the claims, which are the roles that that particular user has. The subject is that user that we have, which is basically the username. And then we set the issuer. The issuer basically is the project name. On the bank, in our case, we Spring Bank or whatever. And then we set the issued ads. Then we pass in the current date, which is fine. Then we set the expiration date. Basically, we want to set the dates from current date. We want to calculate that based on the JWT token validity, which is just a constant that I defined here, and that will be 5 by 60 by 60, which will then give you those number of minutes, and you multiply that by 1,000 so that it gets to millis. Then you add that to the current date, and it will give you how long that a token will expire. And you can configure this based on what you prefer or what you want, and it will still give you the same result as if you want it to be 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, or just 30 minutes. That's still fine. You can configure that based on your preference. Then we're going to sign the token with HS512, and then we give you the secret that we have on our application properties, and then we compact everything into one token, and we return that as we want. So the only difference between the token and the refresh token is the time that it has. So if you see the time here, when I say set expiration, I just multiply whatever I get there by 2, and basically that's it. So there's nothing different. It's the same thing. We just make the refresh token much longer than the original token, and that's the only difference. And that's basically the util that we have, and that's what it does. So now that we've spoken on the util and the configuration, now let's see what we have on security principle. So security principle is an extra class that I added myself, so you can use it to get the currently logged in user. So we have security principle, then we get the, just as we set the context when we're logging in, now we get the authentication from the context as we have a user that is logged in. So we want to see the currently logged in user. So we say security principal that get instance, like here, dot get instance, and then we say dot get logged in user over there. So it will give us the currently logged in principal, and we can be able to use those details as we want. And this is already the user that we want to use, so this is what we have. And we can also get the logged in principal authorities, which means we get the roles of this particular user and see what roles they have, and then based on that we can filter access to other resources as well. So that is what we have over there. So there's nothing, it's not so big. Just I have a dependency injection, and as you can see, this is a different dependency injection, which is the constructor dependency injection, than the other ones that I use, that I usually use. So as you can see here, this is just one a field access, a field dependency injection, which is what I have there. But here I have the constructor dependency injection, which is still fine. And basically then I have the get instance over here, and then I have the get logged in principal, and I get the authorities over there. So there's nothing really fancy on my security principal, and that's basically everything to do with the security configurations that we need for our Spring application. And now we can see the business logic and how we can get users to log in and log out as we want. So now going forward, we are saying the first things first on our business logic, which is the W user service. We want it to be a service, and we want it to be transactional. The reason why we want it to be transactional, and at times you see the transactional being put at the DAO layer, or the data access object layer, which is the where the repositories are, where you do all the transactions with the database on the interfaces there. But I actually prefer doing it at the business logic layer, because then I'm able to say for everything that is in the business layer, if I'm trying to commit something in the business layer and I want it to be in a transaction, if it fails, just roll back the transaction. That's what I want. And you can define the scope and everything and all of that. But for now, we're just going to say a transactional, and that should be sufficient with what we're trying to do. And the next thing is, obviously, we are implementing the user detail service, which is a Spring provided service. And we then add the number of dependency injections right here, which is the iUser, which is the user repository interacting with the database. And we have the user roles repository interacting with the database. And then we have the role service, which will give us the roles of the particular user. And we have the entity service, which will give us the user details that we want. So after the dependency injection that we have, the first thing first is to load the user by username. So this will give us the user details. We override this from the user detail service. So we pass in the username, then we go find the user by username. And if we have the user, then we continue. Otherwise, if it's null, just return null. And that's what we want over there. And the next thing is, if you do have the user, you want to get the user roles. So we're gonna find the user roles over there, and then we say granted authorities. Then we have a list of authorities that we want to assign to the user. So here we're just doing a add into this particular collection of authorities. So user dot for each role, we want to say authorities dot add new granted authority, user dot get role dot get name, and that's what they will have over there. So the authorities will be added according to what the roles the user has. So that is sorted over here. So let's just clean this up a bit so it can look like that. That's still fine. So we have the list of the user roles, and then we have the authorities list over here. Then we say for each role, just load or add it into the authorities list. The ones we have the authorities, we then say user details principal. Then this is the core, the user details core, which is the Spring Boot user. So we pass in the username and the password, and then we give it the authorities. So then it will give us the user details principal. Then we take our user details principal, and we are able to authenticate that over here, and we just set the security principal over there. But I don't really need to do this because it's already done in my request filter. So even if I remove it right here, it should be fine. I'm just doing it here so that you can see what this code will basically do as it extends the user details from there. So it basically will pass in the principal and the principal authorities, then it will set the authentication over there, and we return the principal that we get over here, and we're able to get the logged in user and be able to use them in the application. So that's basically what that does. And then the next thing is, let's see. So find user by username, nothing fancy. We have a user repository, find by username, which is a JPA repository. And all it does is just find the user by username from the database. And then we have a create user, which is the registration. Nothing fancy there. So we validate registration details. So we have the validators that you saw when we're demonstrating in Postman. So those are the validations over there. And then if everything is fine after the validations, then we have the create user over there, and that's still fine, and I have no issues with that. Validations, I have a number of validations over there, so I have a number of checks and all of that. And the other thing is update user, find all current roles. So we just go to the database and fetch that. So basically nothing big, nothing fancy. I do have DTOs to pass my data from the request payload into a database object, and from database object into the response object over there. So there's nothing fancy now. We are basically done with the registration and the login. Basically the login is this part, and then the registration is essentially this part, which has a user register DTO. So let's just check the register real quickly here. So you can see the register is just a POJO, and we are using Lombok to get all args constructor and no args constructor. Then we have all these fields as you saw in Postman, and then we have our access modifiers right here. We can also use Lombok to have these, but I just choose to use these ones, so that is fine, and everything looks good on our request DTO. And then the next thing is once we have the validation successful, we just take the entity as we want, and we have our DTO mapper right here. So I'm basically mapping from the request DTO into a database entity. So I set all of those details right there and get the object as I want. So that's what we have over here. So I get the object and I pass it to W entity, which is the database entity. And once the entity is available, then I say persist that entity to the database. Then once I get the user, and then everything should once I have the DTO user, then I pass that into my DTO mapper and create the user, create the role, and everything else that I need to set. Once everything is successful, I then persist that to the database. So this DTO is very, very small. I just set entity number, the username, and the password. Obviously the password is bcrypt encryption, so that should be sufficient to what we are doing, and there's nothing fancy other than that. Let's see what else we have here. So basically once we have the user, we get the user, we persist the user, then we add the role for that particular user, and we say null. So if we say null, you will see that we do have if the role is null, just set the default role, and that is still fine. Then that user will be persisted with the default role into the database. So let's see what else we have. So we add that role, then we return the user, and then once we have the user, actually let me go to, yeah, yes, this one, not the updates, the create. So once we have the user, then we say user save user.add role, then add the role and take care of that. Then we say user successfully created over there. So basically this is how the registration and login looks like, and essentially now we can move to the controller. So I just want to keep this short and sweet. So let's now move to the controller, because the business logic we've seen, the login and the registration. So let's jump onto the controller and see what the controller does. So in the controller, we have, obviously it's a REST controller, and we have a request mapping of user, and then we are plugging in the authentication manager. So if you remember, we created an authentication manager bean on our security configuration. So that bean we want to uh, add it here as a dependency injection, and then we also want the user service, which we have, and then we want the Jwt token as well there, and then we pass the password encoder over there. And now I'll show you all of these dependency injections where we use them at this level here. So for login, I used authenticate. So authenticate is login, and we are passing an authentication request, and that's basically a DTO which has username and password. There's nothing fancy over there, and as you can see, I have no arguments constructor and all arguments constructor, and also for these, I can use Lombok, but for demonstration purposes I choose to set it that way. And you see the different ways that you can create your classes, create your pojos, and dependency injections. I just want you to have a sense of what you can reuse, how you can minimize your code, how you can enhance your code, how you can refactor your code, all these different elements, so that you can be able to write better code going forward. So all of these I can basically get rid of the no args constructor, the all args constructor, the access modifiers. Because I have Lombok, I can get rid of all this code and just use the Lombok annotations over there. So that will still be fine, but we're just gonna keep this as is for now. And let's see what else we have. So on our create authentication token, we have the request body, which is our pojo over there, and we are basically doing an authenticate. So now some of the dependency injections that you saw there, we do an authenticate, which is username and password, and we say authentication manager dot authenticate, and we are doing a username password authentication token, which is what our security configuration is expecting. So um, when it actually intercepts the authentication request or the request, it will start at this point to username password authentication token. And when it sees that, oh, the interception is an authentication interceptor, and we need a JWT request filter, and if that filter fails, then everything will just fail from the authentication filter. So that authentication manager you saw earlier on basically deals with all our authentication and intercepts the requests and make sure that everyone is authentic before they can do anything in the application. So that's what we do. But if this comes back as success, obviously we can then continue with what we want to do. So we do a try and catch, and if everything goes through here, then we say authentication request dot get username, and we load the user by username, and we will get the user details from that. And then once we get the user details, we can then say Jwt token. So we're gonna say generate the token and generate the refresh token for us. And then once we have those, we're able to actually create a custom response, which is authentication and an HTTP OK, and the authentication response with the token and the refresh token. So the authentication response again is a POJO with just the token and the refresh token and nothing else. That's basically it. And now let's just check the entity response. So generate response, that's a custom response Pojo again. So if you see my Pojo here only has like it's a response entity, so generate response right here, and I do take this the message, the HTTP status, and the response object. So as you can see, it's just a generic object. You can pass in anything over there, and then what we have there is just a map. So it's a linked hash map, and we can just put the response that we want. The timestamp is the date. The map, the message is basically that, and the status is the status.getValue, and then the data is the response object. So based on that, you can then let know how your response are actually built up on your APIs, and then anyone who integrates with your application will know that you have a generic response, and they can expect if the status is okay, then they can go to the data and see what they're expecting from the data. If they're expecting a list, they should just read the data as a list. If they're expecting one object, then they should read that object as one response, and basically that's what they will be using to integrate with your APIs, one standard response. And then going forward, I think we are done with the login. So if everything goes through and our configuration filter intercepts the request as we expect, everything should run through and authenticate the user as we saw earlier on in our Postman. And then the other one is registration. So is authenticated also is here. It's a get. And what we do here is nothing but on the security principal, we get instance, then we get the logged in principal. So you don't pass anything here. We just want to see is the logged in user authenticated, and that's basically it. It's not really nothing fancy here. I just wanted to show you that the security principle that I created will basically assist you in getting the logged in user in the same way. So that's still fine, and you can basically see if the user is authenticated or they are actually unauthorized and all of those. So then the other one will be the registration. I don't want to check the registered endpoint. Let's just do register, which is this one right here. So on register, we do have a user registration TTO, which we discussed just now. And that registration TTO, we set the password. So from the TTO, we get the user password, and we use the password encoder to encode that particular password, which is a bcrypt encode. And then that particular password, we set it over there on the user, and that should be encrypted going forward. And then on the response itself, we just say user service to create user, then we pass in the TTO, and it will take care of creating the user for us, validations and all of those. And then once that is done, we expect the response to come back, and we say this is a create, and status is okay, and that went through fine. And also here, what we can do instead of just okay, we can just say want created, which is a 201, so that will still be fine. Which is much more clear into what we're trying to do. And also you are able to add more specific or much more explicit statuses on the particular endpoint that you're dealing with, and that will be returned with the accurate status code or HTTP status on your responses as well. So that is fine. And now we can jump on to our Postman and see it for the last time, and the register over there. So we created Jane as you saw. So now if I do that, obviously it's going to complain that Jane already exists, so username already exists. So now we can just use Jack. Let's say Jack12, the password is fine, so we can just do that random. Then we're gonna say excuse me, this is Jack, and let's just send this again. Let's see, this email already exists, so let's just change the email to Jack Doe. And then we can also change the mobile number because that is also validated. So let's just do that. And we create Jack, and user successfully created. And then now we are going to log in with Jack 12. Let's go there, and Jack 12. Let's see if we can log in with this guy. So now that is Jack 12. I'm not changing password because nothing fancy with the password. um, just a string, could be anything really. So I don't want to worry about passwords and stuff. It's just easy that way. So let's just set that, and let's save this, and let's see here. Let's see if the user is authenticated. So that gives us a true. So now we have registered our user right here, and what we can do is open an account. So basically the user is authenticated. What we want to pass in there is just the entity number over here. So let's say open an account, and let's say we want to deposit $100 or 100 euros or 100 pounds, whatever amount that you have. So create account. So we have savings account. Minimum deposit expected is $1,000, pounds, euros, whatever currency that you have. So it expects $1,000. Let's stick with that. $1,000 to be deposited. Now let's just say another zero over there. So let's send that, and let's see. Account successfully created. So now we have an account for this particular user. Now let's say we want to withdraw from that account. Let's say we withdraw 80 pound or $80. Let's see. So insufficient funds in specified account. That is because the minimum amount on the account is always $1,000, and that's what we have on our account. So now let's just deposit more money into the account. So let's say we deposit $100. Let's see that. So funds deposited successfully. Now let's go back and withdraw 80, and you will see this. Funds processed successfully. Now you can take your $80 and go blow it as you want. So that's fine. And you have deposited and you have withdrawn $80. And now let's check the balance from your account. Let's just send that. Let's see. Savings account, you have $1,020, and that's what we basically have over there. And if also you still want to withdraw more, you see that, oh, the dinner is actually going to cost more. Let's just withdraw 20. Now funds deposit funds processed successfully on our withdrawal. Now let's check our balance, and our balance is 1,000 as we expect over there. So basically that's what we have, and I hope you like this video, and you do subscribe and stay tuned on or wait for notifications when we upload new videos. And we also have a lot of cool stuff with AWS integrations and AWS services as well. Please do check those out. And any comments, concerns, please do add those in the comment section down below. And if you want some code reviews, please do check me out on the SIP code channel, and see how we can also have your code or your project delivered as optimal as you want. And for now, I'll say cheers, enjoy.